All wrong. The lips weren't right, the hands weren't right, even the cologne was too sharp, too foreign. Kai tried to deepen the kiss, force himself to feel something, but what the hell is going on here? Coach McGregor's voice boomed through the locker room like a gunshot. Ethan jumped back so fast as if Kai had burned him. His face went white, eyes wide with terror. Coach, this isn't... We were just... Ethan started stammering, backing toward the exit. Out! The coach roared, pointing at the door. Now! Ethan grabbed his bag and bolted without even glancing at Kai. Predictable. Kai slowly straightened up, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. His heart was pounding, but not from passion, from fear. The way the coach was looking at him, disappointment, disgust. Kai Harrison. The voice was cold. Pack your things. I'm calling your mother. Coach, please. Now. 40 minutes later, Kai sat in the small apartment that had always been his home, watching his mother wipe away tears. The 40-year-old woman brushed away a tear with trembling hands and sighed miserably. She sat on the couch in complete silence. Kai's head was thrown back against the soft velvet backrest, his face showing a dejected look. Dark chestnut hair was disheveled. Gray-blue eyes stared tiredly at the ceiling. He stole glances at his mother, not quite knowing how to behave. The coach's phone call had been brief but devastating. Mom, the young man began hesitantly. I'm a straight-A student. I don't drink or smoke. I'm the best athlete at school. Hell, I don't even swear much. Be quiet. The woman cut him off. I'd rather you drank and smoked like all the boys your age. How? How could this happen? This is all my fault. I raised you without a father. The woman began to get hysterical. What does that have to do with anything? The young man couldn't hold back. It doesn't depend on you. Damn, it doesn't even depend on me. Go to your room, Kai. The woman spoke in a cold, commanding tone. I need to think. The young man jumped up irritably and rushed out of the living room. A moment later came the sound of his bedroom door slamming. The woman sat for another minute and finally reached for the phone. She hesitated for a moment, but still dialed the number. She knew this number by heart. How many times had she called when she was running late at work, when Kai was 10, 12, 14? Lucas, hello. This is Mrs. Harrison. Something terrible has happened. Kai, I don't even know how to say this. You're like an older brother to him. He listens to everything you say. Could you stop by when you visit your parents? No, nothing like that. No, not drugs. It's hard for me to say. His coach caught him after practice. With another boy, God, Lucas, they were kissing. Please talk to him. Make him get this out of his head. Kai had been sitting in his bedroom for what felt like forever. He didn't want to run into his mother. She'd put on a drama worthy of the best soap operas. Oh God, her son is gay. The young man sat on the floor, leaning his back against the side of the bed. In his hands, he was turning his cell phone, rereading the message from his coach. He ran his hand over his face, feeling his cheeks still burning with shame. Not because he'd been caught with a guy, but because that guy wasn't the one he actually wanted. Ethan Crosby, number 32. Blonde hair, blue eyes, broad shoulders. Like a picture copied from the image that had been lodged in Kai's head 2 years ago. But the copy was faded. Wrong. When Ethan kissed him, Kai felt only disappointment. There was a quiet knock at his door. The young man didn't answer. Kai? Came from the other side. The young man groaned painfully and dropped his head onto his knees. Great. Mom had called in the heavy artillery. The neighbor guy, Lucas Mitchell. He was 4 years older than Kai and had always babysat him when Mom was running late or needed to go out. They'd had a good relationship, and Kai had seen Lucas as a brother until he turned 14. Then he fell in love, and now Mom had called him to cure Kai of homosexuality, his biggest wet dream. Hilarious. Well, I guess I'll take that sound as permission to enter. The older guy opened the door with a laugh. Lucas looked at the martyr with a smirk and came closer, sitting on the floor next to Kai. 2 years in the military had changed Lucas. He'd always been tall and broad-shouldered, but now his figure had become even more imposing, muscles clearly defined through a simple gray t-shirt. But most importantly, his eyes. Bright blue, the color of summer sky, framed by dark lashes. Right now, they sparkled with amusement. These were exactly the eyes Kai had tried to find in Ethan Crosby, and hadn't. So, been up to no good with your baseball teammates? The blonde didn't hide his smirk. Fuck off, Lucas, I'm miserable enough without you. Kai snapped irritably, turning away. His own gray-blue eyes darkened with annoyance. What the hell, Kai? I thought we were friends. And I find out you're playing for the other team from your mother. And with such a presentation, as if you weren't making out with a guy but drowning kittens. Lucas was already asking seriously. So what? What would you have done? Set me straight? Kai got irritated again. We would have talked. You would have told me from the beginning. Maybe you're just confused. Confused? God, about what? About who gives me a boner? Kai snorted, deliberately crude. You're 18, Kai. You'd get a boner from a pitcher. Lucas sighed wearily, running his broad palm over his close-cropped hair. If you wanted to experiment so badly, you could have at least waited until you got home with this friend, he said somewhat detachedly, and Kai noticed the muscles tensing in his forearms. He's not a friend. He's not even from my team. He's the football team captain. We ran into each other in the locker room by chance. Kai turned away, running his fingers through his dark hair. It wasn't curiosity. I've known what I am for a long time. It just happened accidentally. How the fuck does the baseball team captain accidentally start making out with the football team captain? Kai thought he detected irritation in Lucas's voice. Steel notes had appeared in it. Just like that. Imagine. The atmosphere heated up. Kai turned to Lucas and his gray eyes flashed. The words escaped before he could stop them. His goddamn uniform, his short blonde hair, those fucking blue eyes, and that number, 32, on his chest. Heavy silence fell. Oppressive. Kai finally realized what he'd said and slowly raised his eyes to Lucas. The man's broad chest heaved with a deep breath. Blue eyes looked at him with such intensity it became hard to breathe. Kai noticed the muscles tense in Lucas's jaw, how his fists clenched on his knees. That was my number. Kai? Lucas almost whispered, and his usually confident voice sounded hoarse. You don't say? The guy chuckled, but his voice betrayed him with a tremor. His heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would jump out. Now you understand? I couldn't talk to you about this. Stupid, stupid Kai, Lucas muttered without taking his serious blue-eyed gaze away. He leaned closer, and Kai felt the warmth emanating from him. All the more reason you should have come to me. His voice rose, something like pain ringing in it. Instead of making out with some fake, what do you mean? Wait, how should I understand this? Kai tensed and moved slightly away from Lucas, pressing his back against the bed. His breathing quickened. Lucas closed his eyes and ran his hand over his face. Kai watched the movement, noticing the muscles playing in his forearm, how his fingers trembled. When he looked at Kai again, his gaze had softened, but something tense, almost painful, could be read in it. I didn't leave 2 years ago because I got into the military academy, Kai. Lucas's voice was quiet, but every word echoed in the silence of the room. I left because I was afraid. Afraid I wouldn't be able to control myself one of those evenings. That I'd wait until your mother left for her shift, show up with a couple of movies as an excuse, and... He fell silent, clenching his fists so hard his knuckles went white. He raised his eyes, and something dark swirled in the blue depths. You were 16, Kai. 16, and I wanted... He shook his head, the golden stubble on his jaw gleaming in the nightlight. I was protecting you from myself, damn it, and you go looking for some replacement. Kai felt his breath catch. This couldn't be true. Lucas was just... he was just trying to comfort him? Or was this some kind of test to figure out if Kai was really gay or just confused? He looked at the man before him, at the tense muscles in his neck, at the heaving chest, at those incredible blue eyes full of something dark and hot. But Kai couldn't believe it. Couldn't allow himself to believe it. I'm sorry, Kai." Lucas looked away, and Kai saw a muscle jump in his jaw. "Looks like I won't be able to set you straight. I really wanted to explain to you that this is a dead end, but I can't. I want to push you toward it instead." Heavy silence hung in the air. Kai didn't know what to say. It sounded like a confession, but what if he'd misunderstood? What if Lucas just wanted him to accept himself and was saying all this for support? Are you serious?" Kai's voice sounded very young, uncertain. He ran his hand through his dark hair, pushing a rebellious strand off his forehead. "This isn't some lecture about how I should accept myself?" Lucas finally looked at him. Something dark and hot swirled in his blue eyes, making Kai swallow. "I'm very serious, Kai. Too serious for your own good." His blue eyes darkened, pupils dilating. He gently touched the young man's cheek, and Kai felt warmth spread across his skin under that touch. The hand slid to the back of his neck and pulled his head closer. The other hand landed on Kai's leg and slowly moved higher along the inner side of his thigh. The broad palm burned even through the fabric of his jeans. Lucas looked straight into his eyes, and in his gaze, Kai could read a question, and something dark that made everything inside Kai clench. The fingers on his neck dug harder into his hair. With his other hand, Lucas stroked the inner side of his thigh higher and higher, and Kai suddenly understood. This was real. This was actually happening. And it was too fast, too much, too real. It was one thing to fantasize, to dream about Lucas in the darkness of his room, to kiss Ethan Crosby and imagine it was someone else. Quite another when that someone was here now, looking at him like this, touching him like this. And Kai suddenly understood what it meant, where it was leading. And... Stop! Kai pushed against the broad shoulders with his hands, trying to pull away from Lucas. His voice broke. His heart pounded so hard it hurt in his chest. "No, you're right," he whispered with real fear now, and he heard how pathetic it sounded. Lucas immediately removed his hands as if burned. Something flickered across his face, but he quickly hid it behind an easy smile. The muscles in his jaw tensed, his fists clenched, but his voice sounded calm. "What's no, Kai?" A purring whisper, but without that dangerous heat anymore. "I don't want to. Please, Lucas, I'm confused." Kai looked away, feeling his cheeks burn with shame. He couldn't look into those blue eyes, couldn't see what was reflected there. "Good boy." Lucas's voice sounded even, almost cheerful, but Kai didn't see how the muscles in his neck tensed, how white his clenched knuckles had become. Lucas lightly kissed the tip of the young man's nose, almost patronizingly, the way he used to when Kai was 14, when Kai scraped his knee and Lucas put a Band-Aid on his wound. "Well then, let's go tell your mom you're okay and eat her wonderful pie?" He didn't see Lucas close his eyes for a second when he turned toward the door. Didn't see how for a moment Lucas's entire face contorted with pain. "Thank you, Lucas," Kai whispered. "Always." Lucas tossed over his shoulder, and his voice sounded normal. Easy, friendly, brotherly. But when he turned away to open the door, his hands were clenched into fists so tight his nails dug into his palms. Mom had already calmed down. "Well, did you talk everything through?" she asked, pouring tea. "Yes, Mrs. Harrison." "Kai's fine. Just teenage confusion. He'll figure it out." Kai looked at him and didn't understand. Lucas had just confessed. Maybe this had all been a lesson? A way to show Kai that he really was confused, that he wasn't ready? Lucas met his gaze and winked. Easily, like a buddy. Nothing like how he'd looked a few minutes ago in the bedroom. And Kai began to doubt. Maybe he'd imagined it all. A week passed. 7 days during which Kai couldn't think about anything else. Every night he lay in the darkness, replaying their conversation in his head. I left because I was afraid I wouldn't be able to control myself. You were 16, and I was protecting you from myself, damn it. It sounded like a confession. But then, when Kai got scared and pulled away, Lucas had switched so easily. So quickly returned to the role of older brother. Kissed him on the nose, offered pie, winked at the table. Maybe it really had just been a way to show Kai he wasn't ready. Maybe Lucas had deliberately taken that step forward, knowing Kai would get scared. To prove that all of this was just teenage confusion? But then why did Kai still feel the touch of that broad palm on his thigh? Why did he still see that dark look in those blue eyes? Why did he still remember how Lucas's fingers trembled when they buried themselves in his hair? It had been real. On Friday evening, he couldn't take it anymore. He picked up his phone, typed a message, deleted it, typed again. His fingers were shaking. "Hey, we haven't really talked since that time. Can I come over?" He sent the message and immediately regretted it. What was he doing? If Lucas really had just been helping him figure things out, this would be so awkward. If everything Kai had understood from that conversation wasn't true, if he'd made it up, projected his wishes onto reality. The phone buzzed. The response came almost instantly, as if Lucas had been sitting with his phone in his hands. "What or who are you getting hard for this time? Vegetables?" Kai stared at the screen. Was this a joke? "Nothing's giving me a boner." "Ah, so now you have the opposite problem?" "There's no problem. This has nothing to do with my dick. I just wanted to watch a movie, hang out." Kai watched the 3 dots indicating Lucas was typing. Erased. Typing again. His heart was pounding. "Come over then. Don't forget a couple movies." "Which ones?" "Forget it, just come." Kai stared at the screen for a few more seconds, then grabbed his jacket and ran out of the house before he could change his mind. An hour later, Kai was already running up the stairs to the 3rd floor. It was pouring rain outside, and by the time Kai reached the right apartment, he was soaked through. His t-shirt was stuck to his body, dark hair was wet and falling into his eyes. Water ran down his neck, slipped under his collar, and Kai was shivering, either from cold or nerves. "Lucas, Mark, I'm here, and I brought pizza," Kai called out, adjusting the box in his hands. "Mark's not here. He's got a shift at the club. He'll be back around 3 in the morning." Lucas came out into the hallway and froze. Kai looked up and felt something clench low in his stomach. Lucas was wearing gray sweatpants hanging low on his hips and a white tank top that emphasized every curve of his muscular torso. His hair was damp from the shower and tousled. A light flush played on his cheekbones. He looked relaxed, domestic, incredibly attractive. And he was looking at Kai the way he hadn't looked at the dinner table with Mom a week ago, looking the way he had in that bedroom before. "Holy shit! Harrison, you're soaking wet." Lucas laughed, and his blue eyes sparkled. But Kai noticed how his gaze slid over his figure, over the wet hair falling on his forehead. "There's, rain out there." The young man huffed indignantly, but his heart was pounding. "At least the box stayed dry." "Yeah, too bad you didn't." Lucas took a step closer, and something low in his voice made Kai swallow. "Go take a shower. I'll get you something to change into." Kai was drowning in Lucas's clothes, and it seemed both funny and somehow intimate to him. The gray hoodie was too big in the shoulders. He had to roll up the sleeves. The sweatpants only stayed up thanks to the tight drawstring. But most importantly, all the clothes smelled like Lucas. He came out of the bathroom to find Lucas in the kitchen. The man was getting beer for himself and cola for Kai from the fridge. He remembered Kai didn't drink. He remembered so many little things. How Kai liked pizza with pineapple, how he liked Nolan films, how he always tucked his legs under himself when he sat on the couch. Lucas turned around and froze for a second, looking at Kai and his clothes. Something flickered in his gaze, warm, possessive, but he quickly pulled himself together. "Looks perfect," he smirked, though it was an outright lie. "Come on, pick a movie." They'd already finished the movie when the clock hands crept toward midnight. They were sitting on the couch, Kai upright with his legs tucked under him, Lucas turned half sideways, his bent arm resting on the back of the couch. His long fingers were tapping on the younger guy's shoulder, almost absent-mindedly. Kai tried to focus on the movie, but all his attention was riveted to that light touch, to the warmth coming from Lucas, to how close they were sitting. "So, should I call you a cab?" Lucas looked at the young man questioningly. "What about the second movie?" Kai asked in surprise, though his heart beat faster. "What second one?" The blonde frowned, a small crease appearing between his brows. "Well, you wrote it yourself. A couple movies?" "God, Kai." Lucas laughed and dropped his head on the brunette's shoulder. Kai felt warm breath touch his neck, and he shuddered. Lucas didn't pull away for several seconds, and Kai could swear he felt a light touch of lips right under his ear. "Either way, it's late." Lucas's voice sounded hoarse, lower than usual. "Can't I stay? I told Mom I was staying at your place." Kai's voice sounded quieter than he wanted. Lucas raised his head and looked at him. His gaze became serious, almost wary. Something dark swirled in his blue eyes. "Kai, are you kidding?" he asked somewhat strangely, and the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Are you expecting someone?" Lucas smirked and got up from the couch, heading to the fridge. Kai watched the muscles play on his back under the thin tank top, how his hips moved. Was he doing this on purpose? Or did it just seem that way to Kai? "Listen, I've been wondering." Kai suddenly asked hesitantly when Lucas returned. "Why did you really move out from your parents' place so suddenly?" Lucas sat down, but closer now, so close their knees almost touched. He handed Kai the cola, keeping the beer for himself. "What do you mean?" Lucas took a drink from the bottle, and Kai couldn't help but notice his throat working as he swallowed. "Well, after you, mentioned moving out." Kai gathered his courage. He needed to know. Needed to understand what had happened a week ago. Was it real? Or had he made it all up? "I thought about it later. You really did move out suddenly. What was the real reason?" Lucas was silent for several seconds, turning the bottle in his hands. Then he looked up, and Kai saw in his blue eyes the same pain that had flashed a week ago when Kai pushed him away. "The real reason?" Lucas smiled gently and moved even closer. So close that Kai could feel the heat of his body. "Well, that explains a lot. Kai, I told you the real reason." He brought his face closer and whispered right in Kai's ear, sending shivers down his spine. "You're the one who took back your words, not me." He kissed Kai on the temple. Slowly, tenderly, lingering a second longer than necessary. And this innocent touch of lips burned hotter than any fire, because now Kai knew. This wasn't his fantasy. This was real. "Maybe I should still call you that, cab?" There was tension in Lucas's voice, almost a plea. He was giving Kai an out. One last chance to retreat. "No." Kai answered firmly, and his voice finally didn't tremble. He turned to face Lucas, their noses almost touching. "I've regretted pushing you away 100 times already. I hoped that at least part of what you said and did wasn't just a demonstration." Lucas froze. Hope flared in his eyes, so bright that Kai felt his heart squeeze. His hand rose and gently touched Kai's cheek, his thumb stroking his cheekbone. "I never planned to give up on you." Kai held his breath. "But the way you got scared," Lucas continued, and his blue eyes darkened. "I realized you really weren't ready yet. I want you to grow up, to not be so fragile. For us to be equals." His large hand slid to the back of Kai's neck, fingers burying themselves in dark hair. "And how do you expect me to do that when you're here looking at me like this?" He began to gently stroke Kai's neck, and Kai involuntarily tilted his head, offering himself to the caress. "I'll be honest, I was scared." Kai exhaled, and his hands found their way to Lucas's broad shoulders, feeling the muscles roll under his fingers. "I thought you were just testing me." "You thought I was pretending?" Pain rang in Lucas's voice. "Kai, I would never—" He shook his head. "I don't know how to pretend. Not with you. You know, I wonder if this is how girls feel before their first time." Kai looked away, carelessly exposing his neck. "They want to, but they're afraid." Lucas leaned forward and unexpectedly bit the tender skin under his ear. Not painfully, but sensitive enough to draw out a quiet moan. "Hey!" Kai cried out. Lucas laughed, though his breathing had quickened. He kissed the spot he'd just bitten, then moved higher to the ear. "See? I can't control myself." Kai didn't answer. Instead, he leaned forward himself, closing the last few centimeters, and touched his lips to Lucas's. It was a soft, timid kiss, nothing like the one in the locker room with Ethan Crosby. This was like coming home after a long journey. This was like finally finding what he'd been searching for his whole life. Lucas froze for a second, then made a low sound, almost a growl, and deepened the kiss. His hand on the back of Kai's neck tightened, pulling him closer. His other hand wrapped around his waist, almost completely encircling it. Lucas led, but didn't dominate. His lips were soft, insistent. Kai moaned into the kiss, and his hands slid higher, wrapping around Lucas's neck, fingers burying themselves in the short hair at the nape of his neck. Lucas slowly turned without breaking the kiss and laid Kai on his back on the couch. He loomed over him, supporting himself on his elbows so as not to crush him with his weight. Kai threw his head back as Lucas's lips left his mouth and slid lower, to his chin, to the sensitive skin under his ear, to the curve of his neck. "Lucas." Kai exhaled, and his hips involuntarily pushed upward. "Shh, baby. I promised to wait. Promised you'd grow up. But you're not making it easy." His hand slid under the hoodie and lay on Kai's bare stomach. Just rested there, warm and heavy, the thumb slowly stroking the skin just below his ribs. Kai arched at the touch, his breathing becoming ragged. Lucas made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a groan. "You're going to kill me, baby." They tangled on the couch, exchanging kisses and touches. When Lucas finally pulled away, they were both breathing heavily. Kai's lips were reddened, swollen, his eyes clouded with desire. Lucas looked at him with such an expression. Pride, tenderness, barely restrained passion. "Let's go to bed, just to sleep. I want to wake up and see you next to me. I want to make sure this isn't a dream." Kai nodded, unable to speak. Lucas stood up and extended his hand. He pulled Kai to his feet, and not letting go of his palm, led him to the bedroom. On the nightstand stood a framed photograph, a 14-year-old Kai with a mop of dark hair and a too big smile. Kai looked at the photo and felt something squeeze in his chest. You took this photo with you?" "Of course I did." Lucas hugged him from behind, resting his chin on the top of his head. "What if I hadn't come?" Kai whispered. "What if I'd decided you were just testing me? Then I would have waited longer." Lucas kissed the top of his head. "As long as it took, even if I had to wait forever." They lay down in bed, and Lucas pulled Kai close to him. They lay in silence, listening to the rain outside the window. Kai felt Lucas's breathing slow down, become even. "Lucas? Sleep, baby. I'm not going anywhere." And Kai fell asleep, for the first time in a week peacefully, without tormenting doubts. Kai woke to bright light streaming through the thin curtains. The first thing he became aware of was warmth. He was literally enveloped in it. Lucas was holding him. Slowly, Kai turned his head. The man was sleeping, and in his relaxed state he looked younger. Kai couldn't resist. He turned completely, settling face to face with Lucas. The movement made the man stir. His eyes slowly opened, and Kai saw the blue iris focus on him. A second of confusion. Then his lips stretched into a soft smile. "Good morning," Lucas said hoarsely, his morning voice an octave lower than usual. "Morning," Kai replied, and suddenly felt shy. "No regrets?" Lucas asked, and vulnerability could be read in his eyes, which he usually hid so carefully. "I only regret not coming sooner. You know what I'm thinking about? That your mother is going to kill me when she finds out." Kai snorted. "She's the one who called you. Somehow, I don't think she meant it like this." Lucas kissed his nose. "But you know what? Let her be mad. You're worth it." Lucas stood in the living room, holding a framed photograph. In it, a 22-year-old version of himself sat on a couch next to an 18-year-old Kai. He glanced up at the mirror on the wall and caught his reflection. Gray threaded through his sandy blonde hair now, more noticeable in his beard. Laugh lines had settled around his eyes, deeper grooves bracketing his mouth. 20 years, he murmured to himself. Where the hell did they go? The front door opened behind him. "Talking to yourself again, old man?" Lucas turned, and even after 2 decades, his breath still caught. Kai stood in the doorway in full Special Forces tactical gear. He'd grown into his frame over the years, filling out in ways that 18-year-old Kai never could have imagined. His shoulders were wider now, arms thick with muscle earned through years of intense training. Dark chestnut hair, beautiful, Lucas said softly, and he wasn't talking about the photograph. Kai's expression softened. He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around Lucas from behind, resting his chin on the older man's shoulder. Together they looked at the photograph. "God, we were babies," Kai said, his voice a low rumble that Lucas felt more than heard. "You were a baby. I was trying very hard to be responsible. And how'd that work out for you?" Kai pressed a kiss to Lucas's temple, right where the gray was most prominent. "Terribly. You corrupted me completely." Lucas leaned back into the embrace, solid and familiar after 20 years. "How was the debrief?" "Long, classified. The usual." Kai's arms tightened fractionally. "I've got 2 weeks leave before the next assignment." 2 weeks. He turned in the circle of Kai's arms, reaching up to tuck a loose strand of hair behind his ear. Lucas cupped his face, feeling the rough stubble under his palms. Kai had followed him into the military 6 months after that rainy night. Kai murmured against his lips, "I've got 2 whole weeks to remind you exactly why you waited for me all those years ago." Lucas laughed, the sound warm and full. "Still trying to kill me, baby?" "Every day for the rest of our lives." And Kai kissed him the way he had that first night 20 years ago, and every night since, like Lucas was the only solid thing in an uncertain world. Behind them, the photograph sat on its shelf. 2 young men on the cusp of everything, not knowing yet how the story would unfold. That 20 years later, they'd still be coming home to each other. Some promises, it turned out, were worth keeping forever. The end.